Back on track. The United States and North Korea are set to resume their nuclear talks. We're at the White House. Impeachment inquiry. Analysis of the possible outcomes facing President Donald Trump. Fight for the unborn. Why pro-lifers held a rally today outside the Supreme Court. And protecting the faithful. Ambassador Sam Brownback tells us how he and the Vatican are trying to defend religious freedom. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 1st, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. The violence in Hong Kong has reached a new level. Demonstrators say police crossed the line today when they opened fire on an 18-year-old. This as tens of thousands of Hong Kong citizens take to the streets in protest of Beijing, almost overshadowing the 70th anniversary celebrations of communist control of China. Police and protesters clashed as widespread violence broke out across Hong Kong. There were instances where officers drew their weapons. A total of 51 people were injured, and 2, including the 18-year-old, were shot in the chest, are in critical condition. Officers have previously fired warning shots in the air during months of demonstrations, but this is the first time a protester is known to have been shot. North Korea and the United States have agreed to resume nuclear negotiations this weekend. It follows a month-long stalemate over the withdrawal of sanctions in exchange for disarmament. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. This won't be a meeting between President Trump or North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Instead, it will involve lower-level staff. It is the first meeting resuming after former National Security Advisor John Bolton was forced to step down.
President Donald Trump has often praised his friendship with Kim Jong-un, but former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton isn't optimistic the North Korean dictator is ready to give up his nuclear weapons.
Under current circumstances, he will never give up the nuclear weapons voluntarily. Our policy should be that we do not accept it.
Bolton's aggressive approach to dealing with North Korea didn't work for President Trump, and now the Trump administration will resume nuclear negotiations without him. North Korea's delegate to the United Nations blames the U.S. for increasing tension with North Korea.
The relations between the DPRK and the U.S. have made little progress so far.
Meanwhile, President Trump is praising a key North Korean ally, tweeting, "Congratulations to President Xi and the Chinese people on the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China." China's Communist Party marked the anniversary with a military parade that showcased the country's global ambitions. It featured a new hypersonic nuclear missile believed to be so fast it can outmaneuver all U.S. defense shields. A U.S. lawmaker wants China to abandon its, quote, imperial agenda. Republican Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri blames the communist country for killing millions of its own citizens and stealing American jobs and ideas through trickery and deceit.
A senior administration official says President Trump is concerned about China's growing ambition and presence. Still, the U.S. wants China to uphold sanctions against North Korea so the country has an incentive to denuclearize. Wyatt?
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says under Senate rules he would have, quote, no choice but to take up any House-approved impeachment articles against President Donald Trump. The Kentucky senator made the comments yesterday as part of a television interview. House Democrats are pushing for quick action on their probe into a transcript and whistleblower complaint that alleges President Trump pressured Ukraine's president to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden and his son. Joining me now to offer his analysis is Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Hans, welcome back to the program.
Sure.
President Trump calls this impeachment inquiry a witch hunt. House Democrats are calling the president's actions an abuse of power. Knowing what you know at this point, looking at everything, is there enough there based on the words, actions of President Trump, anything to warrant an impeachment inquiry?
Perhaps an inquiry, but certainly not impeachment. If you look at the transcript of the phone call that the president had with the Ukrainian president, there's no smoking gun there. The president did not directly or even indirectly threaten to withhold funding. The other thing that I think folks are missing is it's a legitimate inquiry. Did the Vice President of the United States abuse his power to threaten to withhold $1 billion in a loan guarantee unless Ukrainian prosecutors quit investigating his son and his son's appointment to a Ukrainian energy company that paid him an enormous amount of money. I think that's a legitimate inquiry.
Going back to the transcript, as you mentioned,
yes,
the rough transcript of the call provided by the White House seems to show that President Trump urges the Ukraine president to work with Attorney General William Barr and the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, on an investigation into Joe Biden. Is that legal?
I think it's, like I said, that's a perfectly legitimate inquiry. I think folks are, again, they're missing the point that there are indications that, why was Hunter Biden given a job being paid $50,000 a month when he has no experience whatsoever in the energy field? Was this an attempt to influence the president? And why did the vice president, why did he force Ukraine to stop an investigation by a prosecutor of that? That, to me, actually looks like a potential abuse of power. And why wouldn't anyone think that we should investigate that?
Rudy Giuliani has now been subpoenaed. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been subpoenaed too.
Right.
Both men have done media interviews about the phone call and their knowledge of it. Do you think those interviews have proven to be more hurtful, helpful, or neutral?
I think it's pretty much neutral. Again, we know what was actually said, and we should keep in mind that many of the media stories about it have turned out to be wrong. The transcript, again, does not show any kind of threat, and it does show a general concern by the president about corruption in Ukraine, and that is something that folks familiar with the country are well aware of.
Well, the president says he deserves to meet the whistleblower and has accused that person of being a spy. He also accused the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, of treason. Are those risky moves? I mean, we know Donald Trump is out there. He's willing to be bold. But could they bolster charges of him having abuse of power?
Look, the president is understandably angry about allegations that he considers to be untrue. This all sounds very similar to the allegations and his anger that he had somehow colluded with the Russians. We all know that after a 2-year investigation, it turned out that there was nothing to that it was a hoax. So it's kind of understandable that he's angry again. What we do need to find out is, was this whistleblower complaint a partisan attempt to go after the president, or is there actual evidence of real wrongdoing? Right now, we don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Going back to your earlier point about the Joe Biden situation,
yes,
there are calls from Republicans to investigate Biden's actions while in office, obviously, as they relate to Ukraine. Do you think all of that could impact his presidential candidacy?
Potentially so, because as you probably know, that's not the only allegation that has been made against the vice president and his son. There are also allegations that his son went with him on a trip to China, an official government trip, and shortly thereafter, the Chinese government gave his firm, Hunter Biden's firm, $1.5 billion of funds to manage. Again, that brings up the whiff of potential corruption, and it seems to me that's something that we ought to be looking into.
Well, whether they're allegations or they're completely true, we'll be following it, and obviously I think they'll come into play here as we approach the next year's election. Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, thanks so much for your analysis today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
An independent investigator says the Archdiocese of New York is meeting its obligations in responding to the clergy sexual abuse crisis. A year-long review was carried out by a former federal judge at the request of Cardinal Timothy Dolan.
And it stung deeply last year when I heard from some of my people, Cardinal Dolan, we're having trouble trusting you bishops. And I just thought, how can I restore their confidence?
Cardinal Dolan says he hopes the study and its findings will help in the healing process and lead to an increase in trust for church officials. Former Judge Barbara Jones says she and her staff went through the files of every priest and deacon in the Archdiocese, and none of those in active ministry has a credible allegation of misconduct. She also says since 2002, there have been only 2 credible complaints of sexual abuse in New York. Israel is allowing thousands of Palestinians to enter the Gaza Strip to conduct business and hold jobs. The move is an apparent understanding with the Hamas militant group. For its part, Hamas has reduced the number of rockets it fires into Israel. It also has scaled back weekly protests along the border. A journalist in Morocco has been sentenced to 1 year in jail for having an abortion. The case has gained attention among journalists and pro-abortion activists. The lawyer for the 28-year-old writer says she will appeal the decision. She denies having an abortion and says she was married to her fiancé at the time she is alleged to have had the abortion. Abortion and premarital sex are illegal in Morocco. Vatican prosecutors authorize a raid on the offices of the Secretariat of State. Authorities seized documents and electronic devices possibly connected to an investigation into a series of financial transactions. A probe was launched following a complaint by the Vatican Bank last summer. For more on this story, including a closer look at the Holy See's Secretariat of State, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. The United States and the Holy See hold a conference in Rome to mark 35 years since they established formal diplomatic ties.
Faith-based organizations are critical to advancing peace, freedom, and human dignity around the world. They are champions for religious freedom for those persecuted for their beliefs.
U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Callista Gingrich, speaking in a video about religious freedom. The meeting this week is focused on how the Vatican can work with America to promote human dignity. The U.S. Embassy to the Holy See was founded in 1984 with a mutual vision between President Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II. Sam Brownback, United States Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, joins us from Rome. Ambassador, welcome back to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, it's a pleasure to join you, and particularly a pleasure to join you from Rome.
What issues are you focused on, and why hold a conference in Rome?
Well, the issues we're focused on are three: religious freedom, human trafficking, and development aid. And it will end well because these are three topics the United States government and the Holy See just are in lockstep on. We believe strongly in religious freedom. Both entities do. We believe that we really need to fight human trafficking, and both institutions are doing that. And we both see the need for development aid to helping people around the world that need assistance. And so I think really if we can even strengthen these ties more and more on these key topics, this is going to be good for the whole world.
Why is it also crucial to partner with faith-based organizations when you think about protecting religious freedom globally?
Well, they're the ones that have people out in the field everywhere. They're the ones that get persecuted. They're the ones that can feed us the information first, and they're the ones that can be the big advocates locally on the ground for religious freedom, in particular in the space that I work in. A lot of times we will try to help get started in various countries religious freedom roundtables where all the actors in that country come together, all the faith actors, and protect each other's religious freedom, standing up for each other's religious freedom and saying that you're entitled to that space, that religious freedom, as a fundamental human right, everybody, everywhere, all the time.
And you guys at the State Department have been working to that end to bring people together to talk about this issue. In June, you mentioned 80% of people live in places where religious freedom is under attack, yet most of the world organizes their lives around a set of religious beliefs. So then, noting that, what are some of the practical things people can do, just everyday people, to help religious freedom for all?
Yeah, they can raise the topic. If they are living in a religiously free space, they can push their legislators to raise this topic in other countries. We're seeing a lot of nations now start getting active in this space, and it really helps a lot. They can become aware. They can look into various countries and invite speakers in, people that have been persecuted for their faith, so that the local community can find out. They can help rebuild. We've got churches and parishes in various places helping to rebuild churches in the Middle East, particularly like in northern Iraq, where they're giving money from their parish to help rebuild a persecuted population somewhere else. They can help and start these religious freedom roundtables where in their nation they push to get religious freedom for everybody in all places around the world. Those are practical steps that we hope to see more and more unity of effort between the United States and the Vatican on.
And you know, this is such an appealing message for people of faith, no matter what their faith background is. But I also want to ask you about people who are non-religious, who don't practice faith. Why should they care about religious freedom? Why is this an important topic?
Well, the American Humanist Association attends the Religious Freedom Roundtable in Washington that I help co-chair. And they're there to protect their right not to believe. And there's places in the world where you have to, or you're forced to have a faith, or you're persecuted for not having a faith. And they want their freedom of religion or belief to be protected as well. And so we reach out to people like that and we say this is an important, fundamental human right. This is something that everybody is entitled to everywhere, regardless of belief or lack of belief. And that's why I think this is an important one for everybody. Plus, it's a foundational human right. If you get this one right, you tend to be better about other human rights. You get this one wrong, you tend to be worse about other fundamental human rights.
Well, when you come back to the United States, what do you think your biggest takeaway from being here in Rome will be?
The growth and the cooperation. That's the thing we just really need. These are entities with different capacities, but with great capacities. The Vatican, the Holy See, and the United States government. And so I'm really hopeful of having a much more knitted together effort on pushing for religious freedom for everywhere and of all faiths. That's my takeaway that I'm hoping for from here, and I believe we will have it.
It is such an important topic and one that we continue to cover. Sam Brownback, U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, thank you so much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Coming up, Prolifers rally in front of the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. A federal judge has upheld a pro-life law in Virginia requiring women to have an ultrasound and wait at least 24 hours before having an abortion. The ruling also bars anyone but a physician from performing abortions. The judge, however, overturned one pro-life measure. He struck down a state law which says second trimester abortions must be performed at a licensed outpatient hospital. Top federal health officials say they are redirecting nearly $34 million to provide family services to low-income women without funding abortion. Diane Foley, the director of the Title X Family Planning Program, says they are getting close to serving the same number of people even after more than 900 pro-abortion clinics withdrew from the funds. The Trump administration banned health care groups who received those federal government funds from referring women for abortions. Some of the aid will be used to provide women with birth control. Artificial contraception goes against church teaching. Pro-life Americans rally at the Supreme Court. They're sending a message to the justices ahead of a new term starting next week. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi brings us their story.
A person's a person, no matter how small.
Pro-life Americans raise their voices for life.
We will abolish abortion in our lifetime.
Speaking outside the court that legalized abortion across the country.
January 22nd, 1973, 7 justices gave us this horrible law in the Roe decision, which makes abortion legal through all 9 months of pregnancy. They have ushered in an abortion culture that's led to over 60 million lives lost.
These people are adding their names to a list of 250,000 people with an urgent message for the Supreme Court.
I'm here for the babies. I'm here for those mothers that are being lied to, that it's okay and that you'll be fine, because they're not fine.
Melinda Tebow started this petition in 2017.
God always did things with small numbers. Everyone seemed to be outnumbered in the armies in the Bible. But I think that there can be well over 1 million signatures.
The petition offers 5 reasons why they think justices should strike down Roe v. Wade.
There's 1 million people waiting to adopt newborn infants in America.
Lawyer Alan Parker argues the case.
73, the court said, we don't know when life begins. So under the law of precedent, when science moves forward, the law moves forward. Now, based on new science, life begins at conception.
250,000 Americans have signed on. While they pray and work for the day, Roe v. Wade is a thing of the past. At the Supreme Court, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, why Pope Francis is praying for missionaries. Plus, we hear about a medical alternative to assisted suicide that has the support of church leaders. The Catholic Medical Association, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and the Catholic Health Association are all voicing support for a bill pending in Congress that would fund training, research, and education for palliative care. Palliative care involves medical care and pain management for those suffering from a serious illness. and refraining from taking actions that directly take the life of the patient, as opposed to assisted suicide and euthanasia. Join me now by Skype from Orlando, Florida, is Dr. Stephen White, chair of the Catholic Medical Association's Healthcare Policy Committee. Dr. White, welcome into the program.
Thank you so much.
How does palliative care support church teaching? I mean, we're talking about patients here at a critical point in their lives.
Absolutely. Well, let me say first that palliative care from a medical perspective is the care of patients who, with, as you said, with very serious illness. And sometimes those patients require a higher level of medical management that can be provided with a primary care physician alone. Although I will say palliative care is something that's practiced across the spectrum of medicine. But in that case where there's a very serious illness, there can be a need for increased expertise in management of pain and symptoms of that sort. And in particular also, Wyatt, assisting the families in this situation who undergo and experience tremendous stress in this circumstance. So the church obviously would support this. And in fact, in the number 2279 of the Catechism, palliative care is mentioned specifically as a form of disinterested charity and as such should be encouraged. Pope Benedict XVI at the World Day of the Sick during his pontificate even went so far as to say it's a right that every human being has and we should encourage and defend it. So palliative care is clearly a part of the church's teaching and is something very important medicine today needs to be providing to actually help to prevent patients from considering physician-assisted suicide.
Okay, so we know the church supports it. What message do you think it sends, though, that so many Catholic groups, including the Catholic Medical Association, support this pending bill, the Palliative Care and Hospice Education and Training Act?
Well, what's so important is it indicates that the Catholic Church and all of us that are players in the Catholic Church, physicians, the bishops, the healthcare systems, support this approach to the care of patients in these critical situations. And we want to see training and funding for that training supported, and we want to participate in that. We're looking forward to utilizing those funds to train palliative care teams to do this type of work and also to train other physicians, nurses, chaplains, and social workers in this area of expertise.
Dr. White, some people are concerned that if this bill passes, that some groups getting the money might support and fund assisted suicide and euthanasia programs. Is that a legitimate concern?
It's absolutely a legitimate concern. We were concerned about that when we first got word that this was going to be something pending in Congress. And so we worked very hard with our partners in the coalition on this bill, the USCCB and the Catholic Health Association, to ensure that language would be placed in this bill that would preclude funding of training for anything that supported either the promotion or cause of death or even an assisting in death. And I think if people will look at the language itself, they'll find that that is not something that this bill will authorize.
If our viewers want more information on why the Catholic Medical Association supports this bill and palliative care, where can they go to find it?
Please go to our website at cathmed.org, and we have a complete statement that summarizes why we made this decision and the press release that we released last week in support of this bill.
All right, such an important medical issue, and we'll continue to keep our eye on this as well. Dr. Stephen White, chair of the Catholic Medical Association's Healthcare Policy Committee, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Pope Francis says his prayer intention for October is for missionaries.
Llegar a las periferias, a los ambientes humanos, a los ambientes culturales y religiosos todavía ajenos al Evangelio.
The Pope is asking the Holy Spirit to inspire a new wave of faithful to convert those who do not know the message of the gospel. He also says people need to be told about the power of prayer.
Gloria al Padre, al Figlio e allo Spirito Santo.
Finally tonight, Pope Francis opens Missionary Month with Vespers and a vigil at the Vatican. The Holy Father says we should follow the example of St. Therese of Lisieux, the little flower. She received a jolt from the Lord, and her prayers became the fuel for missionaries around the world. That message coming on this feast date for St. Therese of Lisieux. And with that, we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.